Welcome, everybody, to Pro Football Enterprises. I am Ben Parker. That is Austin Freed, and that is Shane Ratliff. We are doing part two of a series that we'll be doing all during the NFL regular season, and that is how to attack different offenses in the NFL. We already did the Packers last week, so feel free to check that out. I think that will be good for several weeks until there is a major injury or until something just looks really different about that offense. I think that will be good for several weeks. Tonight, we'll be covering the Buffalo Bills here in just a second. We have several more offenses on the list that we're going to be doing throughout the regular season. We won't cover all 32, but if there's one that you in the audience would like to see us do, in some cases, we agree a lot on how to attack these offenses. In some cases, we don't because some of them are very difficult and challenging, like tonight's offense. But if there's one in the NFL that you would like to see us do, feel free to hit us up in the comments. We'll be looking for it, or hit us up on X. I am at Ben Park 79 at Ben Park 79. You're more than welcome to hit us up there. Let's get right into it. Buffalo Bills offense, high octane. I'm a little bit of groundwork, and they'll toss it to Austin, and we'll start getting into how we would go about attacking it. The Bills' offense to me over the past year and a half has gotten tougher. I don't statistically bring anything to the table to support that. I just feel like they're tougher to guard now. I feel like Allen is more patient now than he's ever been. I think you can see that versus 3 or 4 years ago. They seem like they're more efficient, a more efficient offense than they've ever been. They spread the ball around, not just one pass to different people, but multiple targets to many different people. I think that's a little bit tougher in that regard. And then they run the football with purpose, which is something a couple of years ago I was getting on them about. They were running the football, but they didn't seem to be running it with a purpose. And it certainly feels like they're doing more of that the past year and a half, which has changed things as well. Again, I'm not asking them to run the football all the time because why would you with Josh Allen as your quarterback? But, running with purpose seemed to be something that they've done a lot more of over the past year and a half. So I really feel like this is a much more difficult offense. And by the way, 2 or 3 years ago, it was a pretty good offense, right? But it's not like it was bad. I just feel like it's harder to stop now than it even used to be because of those reasons. So, Austin, we're going to kick it to you first. Lay in the groundwork you want to, and then give us our first point about how to attack it, man.
Yeah, so I've been experimenting, been trying to learn a little tool that I found and really kind of broaden my ability to find really niche data. And this is my first sort of test with it. I have created a few tables and charts using R and NFL Fast R and things like that. So I have been using this to kind of inform my takes here and what I would do. And I've looked at the Bills' trends and their success rates using things like EPA per play and yards per carry and explosive play rate. And the Bills, from what I can tell, are a very explosive team, and that the eye test absolutely backs this up. They don't necessarily just rely only on big plays, but they are a big part of what makes them such a tough defense, is because as soon as you try and squeeze them and stop them from being such a successful on a down by down basis, they will become very explosive very quickly. So when you are looking at numbers of what to do, the first thing I look at is personnel. Like, who do we have on the field? I think that's the most important, or the first question you have to ask as a defensive coach is, hey, do we want to be out in base? Do we want to be out in nickel, dime? And obviously, nickel is the new base. Everybody's in nickel always. And the plays I have charted here from mostly 2024 are 73 or 735 plays in nickel compared to just 330 in base. So over double, basically. They're seeing
Yeah.
two plays against nickel for every one they're seeing in base, and the rate of dime is only uh, a third of base. So it's falling less and less. It feels like every year, but base is the toughest on a per play basis for the Bills. They have the lowest explosive rate against base of any cover or any defensive personnel package, and their average EPA is lower against base than in nickel or dime, and they average less yards per rush against teams who are in base. So That's how I would start out, is I would just probably run base defense more often than I would be in nickel, or at least try to get it closer to a 50-50 split. Obviously, I had this conversation with Ben before the show. Obviously, defense and offense sort of dictate what each other do now more
Yeah.
nowadays than they did in the past. Versus the past, the defense would say, "Hey, we're going to do this." Offense would say, "Hey, we're going to do this," and then they're just going to clash and see what happens. Nowadays, it's more of a, hey, I see what you're doing. Let me do something with that. And both teams are kind of doing this dueling, chess match of what are you doing? I'm going to do something to beat that. And then the other team says, oh, well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to do this. So different pass rates and things like that. But yeah, base is absolutely the first place I would go.
It's a great point. Shane, I'm gonna get your opinion on that here in a second and see if that lines up with what you were thinking, and then we'll get to your first point as well. But Austin, it's a great point and not something I knew. All right. I didn't go that direction with my studying tonight on Buffalo, but it's a great point about base versus nickel because I drew it up as nickel, right? You've got
Mhm.
basically I put the Denver Broncos helmets for the secondary. So I've basically got one, two, three, four, five guys in secondary, right? Which is your nickel. But what you're saying, and I see it, you know, the base is what's really giving, apparently from a statistical standpoint, anyway, is what's giving the Bills a little bit of a challenge here when they have that three linebacker, four down lineman kind of a setup here. And I just didn't go down that route, but it is fascinating to see that from a statistical perspective. Do you take that 11th guy basically and you turn him into, and again, we're not talking about every single play throughout the game, right? There's going to be a lot of mix and match. But again, from a how often do I do this standpoint, do I take him and turn him into an extra defensive back, whatever you want that to be? Or do I turn him into that kind of a linebacker set here? Or in some cases, maybe even I turn him into a defensive lineman, depending on what I'm expecting Buffalo to do, right? But nickel is by far the flavor of the league and the flavor that's being used most against Buffalo right now as well. Shane, go ahead and pick it up right there. Your thoughts on this nickel base thing, and then roll it into your first attack point.
Well, luckily for me, this rolls into my first attack point because, as Austin mentioned, with the way that offense defense tries to match up, the reason why you don't see an awful lot of dime against Buffalo is because their most efficient wide receivers are the two tight ends, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. So when you're matching up against that size and the way that the Buffalo Bills release them, putting a smaller defensive back to have to cover those two elite tight ends makes it difficult across the board. And as Austin mentioned, when you go into the nickel, which we've kind of covered has become the new base for most people, or base, you're going to try to get some more weight against those tight ends. I think the number one thing for you to slow down that offense is if you can control both of those tight ends. The passing offense dictates their movement. If Josh Allen needs a safety blanket, it's always going to be going to one of those two guys. In times of need, they're the target he looks for. Keon Coleman, the other wide receivers have yet to set themselves apart, I believe. And that grouping also makes it difficult because when you look to try to control Buffalo's run game and you see, okay, they put two tight ends out there, which for most offenses says we're going to dictate the run. Buffalo's more dangerous in the pass in that outfit than most other teams are in the league. So again, this way that Buffalo can control the matchups and still be on a bigger uh, platform, especially when I know it's kind of condensed in the way that you have it here, Ben, but when they're inside that red zone and red zone extended, having
Yeah.
that height and a little bit of extra weight in there makes it real difficult to be able to play against Buffalo in those areas.
No, it's a great point. So let's do that for just a second here. Let's slide this slot receiver right here. Let's just slide him right on over here and make him more of a tight end or a slot tight end, depending on the alignment, right? But let's say that that's two tight ends on the field now with one wide receiver out here and another one out here and then a running back, which of course they love to have the running back out there on they don't like to go empty. So we've got that. So then basically if we're trying to intelligently match up, we're going to get out of nickel a good bit, which statistically it seems like Buffalo's a little bit better against the nickel. And we're going to turn that into more often than not a linebacker right here. So if again, if our defensive personnel supports three linebackers on the field, which some teams do and some don't. But that's what we might be looking at here is switch it over to a little bit more of that base defense as opposed to the nickel because of the two tight end sets for other reasons too. I want to ask you real quick before we get any more points here. Last year when we talked about Buffalo, well, we talked about being able to play man defense on them because we just weren't overly threatened by the individual talent of any certain one receiver. I've actually got that in my notes again this year, even though this is a good, solid group of receivers, but I'm not so overwhelmingly threatened by one guy that I don't feel like I can't man up against them. Shane, do you still feel the same way, or switching over here to more, base defense? Are you thinking more zone now?
No, yeah, I still feel the same way, Ben. I think the wide receivers are a year older in this offense. I think Keon Coleman right now, by most standards, would be a bust for a pick. Um, but I remember last year when we talked about this, and I've said this for years with Buffalo, they get enamored with an archetype for a wide receiver. And that wide receiver has one good year for him. They let him go to somebody else and they draft somebody who's a replacement, not as good as the receiver they had. So like Keon Coleman is Gabe Davis is, it's a continuous chain of wide receivers, bigger body. You're trying to aim for a target where you've seen them not go out and get some. If I'm Buffalo, when I look draft, I would look speed. They
Hmm.
need somebody to be able to take the roof off, and they haven't had it. They still don't really have it, and that would really put Josh Allen at another level because he has the arm talent where he can outthrow anybody. But they right now don't have a wide receiver where you have to defensively worry about that. In my mind, I still think the tight ends are the two best pass catchers on that team. And really, in all honesty, the only ones that I would worry about matchup in the passing game.
Yeah, see, I agree. Austin, I'm gonna get your opinion real quick before I do my first point of the night. I'm gonna get your opinion real quick on the man defense thing, if you're in favor of that or not, or if you're a voice of dissent on that, as we're trying to figure out this Buffalo offense. But I will say I like the speed thing that you're mentioning, Shane, about Buffalo wide receivers, maybe in the future drafts. Can you imagine if we threw in an Isaiah Bond from the 24 draft, or if we threw in a Luther Burden from the 25 draft, or if we threw in an Eric Singleton from Auburn for the 26 draft? What that might actually add another little dimension to this Buffalo offense. But that little dimension, like you said, if it stretches the field, it could open up the field even more for Josh Allen. But Austin, the man defense thing, how are you feeling on that?
So I have data for that as well as what I've looked up, and I just sorted kind of by coverage type and EPA per play and things like that.
Hmm.
And cover one is actually their most or the least successful or most successful against Buffalo, I guess you say. Buffalo
Okay.
is the least successful against cover one.
Okay.
So that kind of supports that. And teams run a lot of cover one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the exact rate here, but the cover one just raw numbers are more so than others. But they also teams also do pretty well in cover two. It's not that much of a difference or cover
Okay.
four. But Buffalo absolutely shreds cover three. So I would
Okay.
just not get in cover three at all, and that was part of my um, keys as well. So if you want to go ahead and add that up there, you can.
Yeah, let's
Is
do it.
yes, I do basically agree that that man coverage is probably going to be your safer bet, and running cover one mixed in with like quarters and cover
Okay.
two zone is going to be your best bet.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a lot better about what we're seeing here, and I thought we might have some disagreement on that, just from not only type of defense but how we're going to run it. But that makes me feel a lot better. Listen, it's a tough offense, so we're gonna have our hands full, right? But we really want to make this difficult. Okay, so my first point of the night is, and I did this last year as well. I'm a type Josh Allen. Let me rephrase that because that's not what the focus is. Allen contain. And what I'm really looking for here is I do not want Josh Allen getting outside the tackle box. Okay. So if this is Josh Allen, the quarterback, it's really important to me that we keep him contained. When he's when he's in here, he can still cut us to shreds, right? We know that. He's patient. He's got one of the biggest arms in the NFL, if not the biggest. But when he's out here, he's two or three times as dangerous because now basically he is his own RPO. Okay. He can run it and cut us to shreds that way. He's bought plenty of time for his receivers to get open, which, whether it's man or zone, they now have more time to do it. And he's just sitting out here looking for somebody to come open. And I'm trying to cover these guys now instead of 3 seconds. I'm getting into 4, 5, 6 seconds while he's sitting out here doing this. And then even if we ain't got nobody open, he's just going to go pick up 5 yards. So I do not want him. And this is hard to do. I get it. This is real hard to do because Josh Allen is fast and athletic. I do not want him out here outside the tackle box. And I remember Bill Belichick talking about that a year or two ago on the Manning cast as well, is when Josh Allen rolls out, he is just devastating because of what Lamar Jackson, the same thing, but tonight we're talking Josh Allen. Josh Allen sitting out there, I you got to contain that. You just can't let him run all over the field and do what he wants to do. You got to contain that. So no matter what, I'm going to be real disciplined, especially this defensive end here. I want him to be real disciplined about not letting Josh Allen get out. This defensive tackle too in combo, they need to be real disciplined on that right hand side. Now, I don't really want Josh Allen doing this over here either because he's dangerous there too. But I'll live with that if I gotta. I just definitely don't want him rolling out here to his right side where it's just so darn devastating. So these two guys right here, defensive tackle, defensive edge, they got to be real disciplined about how they're rushing, keeping those lanes maintained, not letting Josh Allen. And listen, maybe he still weaves his way through and he's got something, but if he's doing that, if he's weaving his way through this defensive tackle and defensive end, he's not standing out here throwing. Now he's got to run it. Okay, so that's a big difference between him getting out here outside the tackle box. Just keep him inside that tackle box. That is my first point for the night on Buffalo. Austin, we already hit two for you. More base and avoid cover three. Anything else you wanted to add in here before me and Shane put on our final points?
Yeah, so I already talked about how like the first thing I want to look at is who I have out there, and then second thing I want to look at is kind of what's our goal here? Are we trying to stop the run? What down is it? That kind of thing obviously comes into play, but going up against the Bills, I want to stop the run. I want to figure out how many guys I want in the box. Do I want to stack the box? And for the Bills, I think the answer is yes, I do want to stack the box. And that is because when I was looking into this data, their explosive play rate jumps whenever they have five or less in the box. So I don't want to go light in the box. And while their explosive play rate is pretty high against like full big boxes, seven or more, uh, it's kind of that sweet spot with six or seven in the box in terms of just their average EPA and stopping the run and getting less yards per carry. Their yards per rush are lower against uh, six-man boxes and seven-man boxes than any other alignment in terms of how you're kind of lining up at the front.
And to me, and again, we're thinking this out loud. We didn't talk about this beforehand. We like to bring our own opinions in and we hash it out live on air. So to me, that already fits with what we're talking about, right? Because we talked about switching over a little bit more base. We talked about trying to play a little bit more man, but in doing that, if in theory Buffalo's playing a lot of two tight end stuff, then that kind of naturally should lead us into a seven-man box right here, right? I mean, we should kind of already be looking. And again, not every play. We know that you can't do anything every play, but that already should be looking at basically seven in the box with everything we've already talked about, right? So, Austin, I feel pretty good about that, right? I don't feel like we're scattered here. It feels like we've kind of got a pretty good focus here, right?
Yep, and all the kind of the point, everything that I've led to and brought in kind of works together, and so I was kind of hoping that y'all would have some points that align with that. And it seems like for the most part, we're sort of in accord in terms of how we want to go about it. But still a few more options for y'all here to throw a wrench in it.
Yeah, I've got two more here, and I'm not stuck on these because for me the big one was the Josh Allen contain thing. Um, but I'm gonna toss them out here, and then I'll let Shane get his final thing here. I'll toss out one first. I've got two safeties marked up here, and that really is as many plays as I can. I would love to have two safeties here, and my only design for that is to keep Josh Allen's arm from taking off on me. Because if at any point, I'm playing man defense, I get rubbed off on a mesh route, and I've got a receiver running, right through here. If I've already got one safety sitting down low, I got nobody here to cover that, right? And so I really would love to have two safeties up there as much as I can. And Austin, you mentioned it, the explosiveness, which doesn't always come from deep throws. But if I'm starting to get sucked in with seven in the box, right? I'm trying to play this tight man. I really would like to have two safeties over the top supporting that because Josh Allen's got quite possibly the biggest arm in the NFL. I think it's him or Patrick myself. But you've got that massive arm. I don't want him, being able to throw freelance downfield. I would like to keep two safeties down there as much as possible. So, Shane, your turn, man.
So to kind of play off of what both you and Austin just talked about, um, I agree with stacking the box, and I'm a guy that likes to do run blitzes and get after the quarterback on the way to try to balance out the run. Um, I think the one thing that I have seen this year from Buffalo is I think Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins are playing better this year than they have in years past, which is giving him protection on the outside, which, like you said, Ben, trying to keep him inside is the most important thing. I think the weakness for the Bills' offensive line is right up the middle. And that's why you double A gap blitz. You try to stop the run internally and hope that we get to Josh Allen that way. Now, the only problem with that is, as you talked about the containment, if we're bringing pressure up the middle, the natural run for Josh Allen is to get to the outside, and that's where the danger happens. But it's a risk I'm willing to take to try to cut down on that run game. I'd rather have Josh Allen have to pull a play, out of the hat, 3rd and 13, as opposed to have him have the full offense and Joe Brady to pick something on 2nd and 3rd. You know,
Shane, I'm glad I saved it because that was my last point, and I wanted to see what you brought out. I'll literally read it off. Heat up the middle. I really want to heat up the middle. If I can't do it with my defensive tackles, and maybe I can't, then I'll mix in some single high and I'll bring a linebacker up the middle. It it's a balance, right? I do not want I do not want Josh Allen sitting back here comfortably because then he can just pick me apart. He's patient. He's got a solid run game. I don't want him running out here. What I'll live with is, and sorry, I'm getting the screen bumped off. What I'll live with is if my defensive tackles can heat him up right here, and now he's got to try to navigate through this, right? Again, assuming defensive end is pressure. If nothing else, he's got to step up under duress right here and make a short throw quick, or he's got to take off and run, which maybe he picks up the first down. I'll live with that. I just don't want him running around out here. That's the one thing I do not want. Okay. I just cannot have that. So I want to heat him up the middle too. And maybe I've got to bring an extra linebacker to do it. Or maybe I've got to turn this safety into a linebacker and play a little single. But I want to heat him up the middle there. He'll beat me every once in a while. He's great, but I just don't want life to be easy for him. So I totally agree there, and that's what I've got as well. So pressure up the middle. I think all this fits together. Austin, your final thoughts on it tonight?
Yeah, I do like most of what we've got out here. I wanted to clarify something. I do love the idea of two safeties, but kind of to pair with my idea of stacking the box, I'm a big fan of the modern day what you call a box safety.
Yeah, yeah.
Your safety who plays closer to the line of scrimmage, a strong safety who's kind of rotated down. Think of like Jabril Peppers, I believe, did it a lot, in his time in New England. Jamal Adams, famously a very good box safety. I think Antoine Winfield plays a really good box safety now down in Tampa. So I like these guys though, who can go up, cover a tight end, and also have the speed. The speed's the important part. If you're a box safety, you have to be able to get on your horse and get vertical. Like you be able to go now, because every once in a while you're gonna get burnt over the top doing that, and I think that's the important thing. So it's not for everybody, but the teams who do have
Right.
the ability to run a box safety, keep that speed on the field, but also be able to play with more in the box. That's ultimately one of I think the biggest chess pieces on the board for a defense.
Yeah, see, and I agree, and I'll get Shane's final thoughts here in a second. How good a personnel I've got or where my personnel is good at is going to totally dictate that. So
Hmm.
if I've got a real good pair of safeties back here, and one of them is more that box safety type that can come up and stop the run physically, but can still scoot back and do some pass coverage, I'm going to use them a whole heck of a lot more in this kind of a flex defense, right? But on the flip side, if my safeties kind of suck, but my defensive tackles are really good, I'm going to keep the safeties back a lot. And these two defensive tackles, I'm going to rely on them to heat it up the middle. So that'll totally stack how we do that game plan. It's a great point there though about the box safety. Go check out Caleb Downs in the draft too. We haven't gotten to him, but he does a little bit of decent box safety work as well. So,
Decent, yeah, decent.
Shane, your final thoughts on what we're trying to accomplish here, man?
Well, I think exactly like Austin said, this is why, and it's a team that, Ben is certainly intimate with. Kansas City defensively plays well against the Bills all these years. Spagnola gets pressure up the middle. The defensive line does their job. And then he has a bunch of linebackers and defensive backs that are all about the same size. They all run about the same speed. And if you're not worried about having to pick out wide receivers in coverage, you can play more guys in the box and then have people feather back out to get into coverage. He also uses undersized linebackers, so to speak, with Drew Tranquil and some of those guys that can run around. They're going to make the play, but they're really probably slow safeties.
Hmm.
If you're really talking about their type of play style. Um, I think it's interesting for what Austin did, where you look at the numbers, and this is one of those cases where the numbers really play to the same old school defensive coordinator vision, where it's one of those ones where they have a guy up in the box that's running these numbers, and the guy's like, "Oh no, on third down we should blitz," and the
Hmm.
defensive coordinator goes, "Yeah, yeah, I've been saying that for years."
Hmm.
Sometimes the numbers really paint the picture that you saw to begin with. And I thought it was real interesting what Austin brought to here, that it still plays along with how, somebody that's not looking at those numbers would still see just based on the talent you're looking out there in the field.
Yeah, agree. And Austin, thank you for bringing in the numbers. We really appreciate that. That helps us out a lot as far as confirming what we think we're seeing when we watch this offense go. And listen, even if we did all of this, you bring a good defense in like Kansas City, Buffalo's still going to score some points. You're just not generally going to shut them
Mm-hmm.
down unless they're killing themselves too. But boy, we're looking at a way to keep them, to 28 points instead of 42. It's a really big difference when you're, trying to scratch out a playoff win or something like that. And Shane, you brought up a great point about the Kansas City defense because Chris Jones naturally creates pressure up the middle just by
Mm-hmm.
himself. But even when he's getting double teamed, Spagnuolo is going to make sure we're running some two-man games, some stunts and twists. We're going to bring something. We're going to bring a cornerback in off a blitz. We're not going to let these guys sit back there. You mentioned the linebackers, even like a Nick Bolton, who's fast enough to
Mm-hmm.
go from one linebacker position all the way to the sideline. He's got that horizontal speed. And even a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, who is not a safety, he's a cornerback, but a really good tackling, spectacular, athletic kind of a corner who can come up and run support and do things that some box safeties could do in there as well. Over the years, Sneed has been a huge part of that as well, even though he's moved on. So I like what we're seeing. It's still a tough offense, all right? So they're going to score. Josh Allen's magnificent. The design of this offense is good, but this is what we would try, and I like a lot of the things that we're trying to do here. So, all right, this is Pro Football Enterprises. We will be doing more of this, more draft prospects as well. So, thank y'all all for being a part of this. Have a great one. Goodbye.